Vineyard Church. Welcome to another week in our Fruit of the Spirit series. And let's just get right into it today. Today is all about kindness. And so the fruit of the Spirit from Galatians 5, it says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, and kindness. It's okay. I'll get you to interact with me a little bit. I know the coffee hasn't kicked in. Before we jump into our texts and where we're going today, I want to make one distinction, a quick distinction, and you should see this on the screen. There is a huge difference in being kind and being nice, okay? Kindness and niceness, I don't know if that's a word, but kindness and niceness, they are not the same thing. Because someone can be nice, and you know what? That's nice. But being nice is kind of the bare minimum. Maybe nice people understand when traffic merges together, you go back and forth and you share the road. I'm going to say that again, having been on the road recently. You go back and forth and you share the road. That's the minimum, people. I'm not upset about anything. I let you in, the next person lets me in, and it is a social contract that everyone agrees to. That's being nice. But kindness goes above and beyond. Essentially, I would say the big difference between being nice and being kind is that being nice doesn't really cost anything. But being kind does. I think true kindness, I think it does cost. It costs you your time or your comfort, your priorities, your ego, your pride, your agenda, your control, your money, your preferences. To be kind is to cost you something. And you know, I have heard people say it costs nothing to be kind. I think I've seen that on t-shirts and Pinterest and everywhere else like that. And while I get what they are saying, you know, kindness is so easy, I actually think it does cost you something to be kind. It may be small, but kindness costs. And that is why I think when we experience authentic kindness, we are moved by it. We are touched by someone's authentic kindness. I mean, last year, some friends of ours let my family borrow their car for a couple of weeks. We only had one van at the time, and they let us borrow a car. That's kind, right? They went without, so we could borrow a car. But they let us borrow it as my stepfather had passed away, and my wife couldn't get away from work as quickly as I was able to, and they were kind. And they said, take the car, head down, be with your mom and the rest of your family a few days early. And Kelsey and I agreed, and she would come later in the week. And so I was able to be with them. And then on the drive back, my wife is driving our van, and I am driving the borrowed car. And the van comes down with a flat. And it's about an hour away from home. And I didn't know this. Our van is like a 2017 something or other. You would think a lot of things come with a 2017. Guess what didn't? A spare tire did not. I checked everywhere, and then I Googled it, and there was no spare tire in our van, on our van. And so I go to the borrowed car, and I get the jack from the borrowed car. Well, of course, it's not big enough to lift the van. So then I drive to a hardware store. In the last minutes they were open, and I buy a jack, and I get back over to the van, and I jack it up, and I called the owners of the borrowed car, told them the situation, and they said, yeah, see if the spare from the car will fit the van. I said, genius. And then I got it out, and I went through all the work of trying to get the tire off the van and then get the replacement tire on there, and it didn't quite fit right. And a smart person would have stopped. I didn't. So then I try to force it on, and I'm like, you know what? We ain't got to go far. It's just, I'll swap. I'll drive the van at 30 miles per hour. The whole, like I'm trying to make all these deals in my head because I just want to get home. And I was just exhausted. And it had been a draining week, and the tire was then stuck. And it was just really, really tough. And it was kind of like everything was hitting me all at once, as I had buried my stepfather just hours earlier. I was just trying to get my family home. And that week in particular, I felt like I had to be strong for everyone else. And I hadn't really let anything out at that point. I knew I needed to, okay? I try to be a healthy human. I know grief needs to come out. I just hadn't had an opportunity yet. And so my kids are doing the best they can. My wife is encouraging me. And it's like 140 degrees because it's Kentucky humidity in August. And I feel like I am about to completely break down. And we're at this like gas station, and then I see some cops pull in, some police officers. I'm like, okay, I can maybe ask them for some help or something. And I kid you not, church, they chased a guy behind the gas station and pinned him under a tree, and they were arresting him. They were busy. I was not going to ask them to help me with my tire. I thought, this is the wildest few hours of my life right now. So the grief is there, the frustration is mounting, and I literally prayed. I forget if it was 2 or 3 words, but it was something along the lines of, God, please, like anything for me to cling to right now. I am frustrated, and I'm tired, and I want to cry. I'm grieving, and I was feeling all these things. And when you pray prayers like that, sometimes God will send you a good old boy in cowboy boots and a big chew in his jaw, and you can't really understand him. But out of nowhere, this guy covered in mud walks up to me. And as he's walking up to me, he has like one of those huge wrenches that are bigger than me. I'm not a very big guy, but it's bigger than me. He brings one of those, and he walks up with an air compressor. And he walks up and he's like, hey, buddy, I haven't seen you struggle for a few minutes. Just thought I would help you out, And so we start talking, and I can see where he was coming from. He had a van full of kids as well. And so we start talking. And I was just simply overwhelmed by his kindness, because he helped me fix my mistake, because classic dad move, right? You got to fix what you messed up. But then he was able to fill up the tire with a hole in it so we could at least get it across the street to a mechanic, drop it off for the night. And anyway, I'm sitting here, and we're just making small talk. And he says, so what brings you out here? And I just break down. And this poor guy probably thought, man, I said the wrong thing. But I was able to take a deep breath and let him know, why I was out, why we were traveling, and how he buried my stepdad, and all these things. And he then shared some heartbreak in his life recently. And before I knew it, he aired up the tire, and we were able to get it across the street. And I was overwhelmed by that kindness. Church, that's not being nice. He was kind. I mean, he was there with me for 40 minutes. We were there so long. When he was done, I went for a hug, and he gave me a hand, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll settle for this. I thought we'd become brothers in the process. But I will never forget that kindness. And then the kindness of someone else to then drive me back the next day to pick up the van and all of that. And honestly, just telling you that story, I'm emotional right now. I'm somewhat emotional right now, but it's not because I'm sad. I'm emotional right now because kindness stirs something within us. And we are moved when people sacrifice for us. That's kindness. And so preparing for this sermon and considering the importance of kindness, that right now, I think nothing is more countercultural than kindness. I think of the Apostle Paul writing this to the church in Ephesus after talking about the importance of unity and how, as followers of Jesus, it is of the utmost importance to mature and grow in your relationship with God. Paul lays down this. This is at the end of chapter 4. For him, it's just part of his letter. Verse 31, he says, get rid of all bitterness if some of us are honest with ourselves, we're already tapping out at this point. Like, I don't know, man. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving one another just as in Christ God forgave you. This is countercultural. Now, speaking as a man, I feel like I see and I hear a lot of things being taught to young men these days. That it's masculine and that it's good to take revenge, to be bitter, to be rageful, to be on edge, to be angry. That somehow these are all virtues. Church, that couldn't be further from the truth. There is nothing masculine or holy about being known for being combative and critical and intimidating. But there is something holy. There is something Christ-honoring to be known by your kindness. Years ago, Pastor Rick Warren said, for a lot of people, they are more interested in looking kind than being kind. And I think there might be some truth to that. How we spend so much time in the mirror to look the part, or a carefully curated existence on social media to look kind and to look compassionate. But how often are we asking ourselves about our attitudes? Or again, speaking as a man, speaking as a married man, how often are we asking our wives about our own attitudes? I don't think we would dare do that, but maybe we should. Because remember, kindness is not niceness. I think there are plenty of nice people in the world, but kindness is unique, and kindness is Christ-like. And you don't even have to be a follower of Jesus to know that kindness is a good thing. Even secular society knows the importance of kindness. There are a couple of psychologists, John and Julie Gottman. They gathered data on successful marriages. And so for decades, they collected data. And they found that kindness is essential to a lasting marriage. In a different study conducted by them, across 37 cultures around the world, 16,000 subjects were asked about the most desired traits in a potential mate. The overwhelming result, the first choice, was kindness. Philippians 4:5, which is so convicting, by the way. Philippians 4:5 puts it very simply, very directly, and in a very convicting way. Let your kindness be known by all. I don't like that myself. I'm like, well, could my kindness just be known by the right people? I don't know, like maybe people who think like me? Can't my kindness just be for people I like? No. May your kindness be known by all, period. So no, we are not to just turn that kindness on and off. I think followers of Jesus, I think Christians, we should be known as some of the most kind people in our neighborhoods, on our street. We should be known as kind people. Not as nice people, but kind. Because kindness is love in action. If you want a simple definition of kindness, there it is. It is love in action. Kindness is not an emotion. Kindness is not a feeling. Simply put, if you do not act in kindness, I do not think you are kind. Kindness is love in action. The Greek word for kind also reveals how true this is. The Greek word is Christos, meaning useful. This means that kindness involves action. Truly kind people will look for opportunities to show their kindness, whether it's paying for someone's coffee behind them or writing a note of encouragement to a friend. Showing kindness in an airport, it may be as big of a miracle as Jesus turning water into wine these days. Have you ever been to an airport when someone missed their flight? I really do. Kindness, I think, is a huge miracle in an airport. Kindness requires action. Now, so, of course, you're in church, so we got to go to the epitome of kindness. Got to go to the greatest teacher of all time. Let's go to Jesus. Perhaps the greatest teacher ever, as he used parables and stories to teach us about the kingdom of God. But his greatest method of teaching was by example. That was his greatest method of teaching. So let's take a look at some of the examples of Jesus and his kindness and how these should influence us and how we live today. I have a few examples. I'm going to count them 5. We will see if we can get through all 5 of those in time. If not, we'll pick up next week, we'll say. Number 1, let's go to this first example. He dines with sinners. Let's read this text and then we'll talk about it really quick. In Luke 19, picking up in verse 1, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and he was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now, I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." I got a question for you just immediately following. How willing are you to dine with a known sinner or an ex-convict? Because most of us, I think, would hesitate. And I think that's a normal reaction. I think it's normal. Doesn't mean it's right. I just think it's a normal reaction that we would hesitate. Or maybe others would just simply say no. Zacchaeus may not be a convicted criminal, but in the eyes of the Jewish people, he might as well have been. Because in Jesus' time, tax collectors would often abuse their powers and line their pockets with people's hard-earned money. And yet Jesus does not hesitate to dine with him. He didn't care if others would see him associating with a sinner. He didn't care if people would even hate him for it. That's wild, Jesus. I think back to my college days. I went to a concert with some friends back then, and I heard through the grapevine, like you do sometimes when the gossip is really hot, that my friends had been confronted by some Christians, and they didn't come to me and talk to me about it, but they went to them, and they said, "That's not a place Christians should be." And I always thought that was an interesting perspective, especially in light of our text today. My friends who I was with the whole time engaged in nothing illegal, nothing immoral, simply attended a concert. I wonder what they would have said to Jesus. "Jesus, don't you know what he does? He upholds systemic injustice. He steals from people. He stole from me. He stole from my friends. How could you, Jesus?" Now, what's interesting about Zacchaeus for a moment is that the point he climbs the tree, he had done nothing beneficial or good with his life, we could say. It's nothing but sin to that point, right? Nothing but mistakes. He did not earn this encounter with Jesus because he turned his life around. Are you following? It's not because he turned his life around that Jesus then said, "Hey, Zacchaeus, you've turned your life around. Can I come over?" No, Zacchaeus, at that point, at this crucial moment in his life, had done nothing with his life but make mistake after mistake. I don't want to church this thing up. Zacchaeus was a bad guy. He hurt people. He harmed people. He stole from people. He had zero remorse until after he encountered Jesus. And I am convinced this kindness of Jesus to look up in that tree and to say, I'm with you today. I think it changed everything for Zacchaeus. Could you imagine that walk to his house? He's probably trying to piece it together. Like, I don't think this guy knows who I am. And I can hear the rumblings around me. People know what's going on. He doesn't know. Jesus didn't hold this over Zacchaeus' head. Hey, Zacchaeus, turn your life around and then I'll come over. You need to show me that you have changed behavior and then I will help you. No. In my vernacular, he said, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to you, man, right now. And so if you are struggling today with someone who maybe has harmed you or hurt you, they haven't shown remorse, let this example of Christ help take you a step forward today. Because you don't have to wait for them to make the first move, to be kind. You take that first step. Because at one point, you were the equivalent of Zacchaeus. Maybe you weren't hanging up in a tree, but you were a sinner far from God. And you are sitting here today, hearing about the love of God because someone was kind to you, because God has been kind to you first. You did nothing to earn it. He simply saw you and said, I'm with you. Could I be with you? That's what God is speaking to us today. Now, maybe in your life you haven't done anything as drastic as Zacchaeus, or you think, I'm not as bad as Zacchaeus, but you're not perfect. Welcome to Rock Vineyard. No one here is perfect, but someone was kind to you. Jesus is kind to him. Or if you don't believe me, you can believe Coach Ted Lasso, okay? He said this. He said, I hope that all of us or none of us are judged by the actions of our weakest moments, but rather by the strength we show when or if we are given a second chance. Zacchaeus gets a second chance because Jesus was kind to him first. So who in your life needs a second chance today? Because you should be kind first. Second example of Jesus' kindness. Number 2 is how he shows compassion to the sick. I'm just going to read these 8 verses from Luke chapter 8 really quick. You'll see them on the screen as well. Now, when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. But Jesus said, someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me. Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Now, in this story, Jesus, he could have reprimanded this woman for simply touching him, but he doesn't. Back then, women didn't have a lot of rights. Jesus could have been culturally justified to put her in her place, if you will. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he calls her daughter, which is a term of endearment. Instead of making excuses like he has to be somewhere, because remember, he's going somewhere. Instead of making excuses, well, I got to go. I need to go find someone else. I'm on a mission. He has time to be interrupted. more than time to be interrupted. He has time to show kindness. He sees her desperation. He has compassion with her. He hears the struggle in her voice, and it led her to do what she did. So, what do you think the woman felt in that moment? Because she was clearly terrified. She was trembling. It's possible because of her illness, she wasn't treated well by the other people around her. But could you imagine the incredible relief she felt when Jesus showed her kindness and compassion instead of reproach? How do you think this single act of kindness changed this woman's life? The answer is a lot. A single act of kindness. It literally changed everything for her. And all he did was stop and ask a question. I don't think there's an act of kindness so small that it gets wasted. Last summer, I was speaking with a homeless man, and we had our kids with us. And I stopped and I just asked him, and it was along the lines, I didn't really say, like, what's your story? Because you never know what you're going to get. But I just said, so, like, what brings you here? You know, I'm just trying to see him as a fellow human, but I got my kids with me, so I'm also kind of being protective because, again, I don't know what's going to happen here. So I'm like, what brings you here today? And he talked for so long about this beautiful story of God's grace in his life. And my kids wanted to give him a couple of quarters. And he said, no, you keep that. In fact, and he pulls some extra quarters out of his pocket. He said, I want to pay it forward. This man with nothing was kind. And it left an impression on my kids. And I mean, as you can tell, it's left a lasting impression on me. And I know it's a cliche, but cliches are cliches because they're true. But I mean, what would happen if we were kind of like Jesus here? If we weren't so self-absorbed with ourselves and our mission and what I got to get done today. Jesus was on his way to Jairus' house. You know, this guy has power. He has influence. I got someone to see. Who is this no-name woman grabbing me? How easily we could have justified Jesus for being short with her, but instead, he's kind. So what blessings are we passing up each and every day, even sitting in this room with us right now, that we're kind of looking past because we're thinking of something else. We got our mind on something else. But it could change someone's life here and now. All it takes is a conversation. This next example is another great one. The third example of Jesus being kind is when he heals a leper. I got 4 verses for you from Matthew chapter 8. Go with me. It says, when Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. And a man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said. Be clean. Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. And then Jesus said to him, see that you don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priests and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them. So just so you know, in those days, lepers were considered untouchable. They were isolated. They were supposed to keep on the outskirts of a society, on the fringes of society. The town or the city, they were to have nothing to do with them. They were to be ignored. But in this interaction, Jesus shows how kindness should go beyond social stereotypes. How we should look where a person is coming from and understand their situation instead of judging them for whatever reason. Because kindness gives perspective. I know it's easy in today's cultural climate and in today's internet age to make fun of others or even vilify people with different backgrounds and experiences. But my sincere hope is that we would attempt to practice the way of Jesus, so that instead of rebuking people, instead of building walls, instead of finding an excuse that may even sound holy and churchy, that instead we would respond like Jesus to tough people. I am willing. I'm willing to do life with you. I'm willing to help you. I'm willing to walk through this with you. I'm willing, I'm available, I'm willing to forgive you. I'm willing to let go. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to walk this out with you. I'm willing to look foolish to the rest of my community to love you like Jesus loves you. Yes, I am willing. Because kindness, it changes things. It shifts our hearts. But I think what hangs most of us up, I think it's us. It's ourselves. Because, again, I think we are very self-important. And we all have valid perspectives, and we all have great stories that we cannot wait to share with someone. But if you want to be kind to someone, be willing to be present with them. This man approaches Jesus, and Jesus is just fully there, fully invested. And he just says, I'm willing. No qualifiers around it. Maybe tomorrow. Oh, could you call me later? I am willing. I think we could really learn a lot when we stop kind of judging things on the surface. There's another quote I heard recently. And it's just 4 words. Be curious, not judgmental. Just be curious and ask someone. Talk with someone. Be present with someone. We got to move through these. Number 4. Hey, are we okay right now? Are we okay? Okay. Number 4. Jesus, another example of his kindness, is how he was preaching to the Gentiles. I got 10 verses. I'm just going to read them really quick for you from John chapter 4. Okay. Now, this is Jesus, had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. And Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. And it was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." Just so you know, some context here. The Samaritan woman is by all accounts a foreigner. And in the eyes of a Jewish person, she is a Gentile. And these two races did not get along. In fact, it was greatly frowned upon and offensive to even talk to a Gentile as a Jewish person. Thus, by preaching to a Samaritan woman, Jesus breaks these societal boundaries, and he showed that kindness is to be universal, that we shouldn't only be kind to those of our own race or political affiliation or ideology or our religious movement or our church or whatever. Everybody deserves compassion, regardless of skin color, identity, religion, and etc. And so as I consider kind of the lesson for us and in our culture today, I think of the many ways that my black and my brown brothers and sisters are still cast to the side as if their struggle doesn't exist or that their struggle isn't any different. It is so easy to overlook the struggles of others when we don't experience those struggles for ourselves. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So may we have open hearts toward those who are struggling around us, who are drowning. And instead of questioning if they're really drowning or not, that instead we would meet them with help. Because sometimes kindness is simply having a conversation with someone you don't understand. So I have a really important question for you. Who is it that you have been told to avoid? Christians, who is the group of people we've been told to be afraid of? Who is the group that we struggle, that you struggle, that I struggle to understand? Because I do not dare stand before God one day and claim that another person or people group or culture or whatever scared me into inaction and apathy. Jesus was not supposed to be talking to this woman. But this is the importance of kindness, that he sees her for who she is, loved and valued by a good God. And so maybe for us today, maybe we really don't know what to do with that because we like to have all the answers, right? Well, I want to know what to say. I want to know how to respond. You don't need any of that. You need kindness. Maybe it's as easy as just embracing someone and just saying, I don't fully understand your struggle. I know we will disagree about a lot of things, but I can promise you I will be a safe person for you. I will be there for you because you shouldn't struggle by yourself. Jesus sits at this well with this woman so she's not alone. And I think there's so much beauty in that. And that's yet another example of how we need to be asking ourselves, how can I be kind to people I'm afraid of, to people I don't understand, to people I've been told to stay away from? How can I be kind? How can I show compassion? Our fifth and last example, we made it through all five. We were plowing through this, okay? Number 5, last one. The fifth example of Jesus and his kindness. Number 5, forgiving those who hurt him. From Luke 22, verse 47 says, while he was still speaking, a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus asked him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, no more of this. And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him, am I leading a rebellion? That you have come with swords and clubs. Listen, people, it is one thing to be kind to people who are kind. It's actually the easiest thing I think in the world. Or at least people who are somewhat decent. It is easy to be kind. But what about the kindness that we show our enemies? Because in spite of his imminent death, Jesus still found it within him to heal the man who was trying to arrest him. Later, even while hanging on the cross, he still manages to ask his Father to spare the people who have hurt him because, in his words, they do not know what they're doing. Forgiving those who have done us wrong is one of the greatest acts of kindness you could possibly do. And I think it's one of the greatest examples of Christ's love within you. When you can be kind to people who are not kind to you. Being kind to your enemies, it does a couple of things. One, it gives them a second chance. And we talked about that, I think, in the first example. What a second chance can do for someone. But the second thing it does, being kind to your enemies, is that it can give you an opportunity to heal. It's practical kindness. That's what this is all about. And so as you think of your situation, as you think of your life right now, where could you insert some kindness? What's a relationship you are struggling with right now where you could insert some kindness? A situation at work, something coming up, something within your home. This isn't about keeping score where they're not kind. I don't want to be kind. I get it. That's human. But I'm not kind because people were kind first. The only reason I'm ever kind is because God was kind to me. I don't get it right every time. You won't either. That's the beauty of the gospel. Is that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Christ was kind. And that is the example we have to practice the way of Jesus. I certainly believe is to practice kindness.